good afternoon, or good morning, or good night, depending on what time you actually see this video. So when somebody goes missing, or even in this case, recovered, but under potentially suspicious circumstances, whether you are law enforcement, a concerned citizen, or an armchair detective, you're going to do two things right off the bat. You're going to look at the people that were last with this person and what location they were last seen at. So we know who the last people were, her group of friends. And we know her last location was this bomb ass party in the woods. So we've talked an awful lot about the friends, but let's talk about this party. We've touched on it a little bit, but let's really take a good hard look at this party. Let's start with the fact that most of us as teenagers went to parties and we did things that were not only inappropriate, but actually illegal. We should not be drinking. And you may or may not have been a wild teenager or a partying teenager, but I will tell you certainly that I was. I did my fair share of things that I should not have done. Just grown people things, except that we did it away from the prying eyes of grown people, and we also did it in a wooded area. Now, if you watch my videos, you know that I live in a very rural area now, but when I was younger, we lived in the city when I was very young, and then the suburbs later on. So my teen years were predominantly in the suburbs, and yet we still found little wooded areas that we would go. The difference between us and what I am seeing here is that we were lucky to get our hands on a six-pack. We would have to stand in front of, I didn't do it, but usually the guys would stand in front of the liquor store or a convenience store, and they would wait for people in, typically like their early 20s to go in and beg them to purchase them some beer. And if they were lucky, they might have got their hands on a six-pack that was then split up among multiple teenagers. I am shocked at how hard these kids actually party. And not only that, how organized their parties are. Hell, I'm ready to go and employ them as event coordinators for my next get together. I mean, there was some serious planning. These parties here seem to be a regular thing. It was first kind of presented to us as just this one big bash for end of the year or going away to college for some of the seniors. But when you actually do a little digging, you do see that it seems like the sanctuary, as they, called their little area in the campground where they would get together, a very regular thing. Okay, they might have titled it different things, but these parties were pretty regular. And by the picture of the bar, which actually was taken a week prior, we know that these kids went hard. This was not just a couple of beers. That with the allegations of substance use beyond that of just marijuana, which, whether you approve or not, is not unusual for teenagers. It sounds like these kids had access to a lot of very harmful things. And now enter this fight club, if you will. So I became aware about a year ago of what was known as slap boxing matches, and TikTok really blew that up. And so these kids in high schools all around the United States would meet up in the bathroom, and these were agreed upon times and locations, even within the school during the school day, where kids would meet up to slap box. And it might sound kind of silly and stupid, but we know that these things aren't, because they lead to people getting into real fights. Who won, who didn't, everybody's videotaping it, kids are egging it on. I feel like it has the potential to turn into, actual real fights, obviously. Now, I get particularly boys are fueled with adrenaline, hormones, testosterone, like you name it, and they need an outlet for it. But like, for the love of God, can you join like an organized sport, like organized boxing or football or something, and get it out of your system? Now we have it amped up to actual boxing matches in the woods. And maybe that doesn't sound so terrible. Hey, you guys got a problem together? Put on those boxing gloves and work it out. But you're talking about an unsupervised setting where these kids are boxing and potentially fueled by alcohol. Even as adults, how many of you have gone to parties and seen those people that just can't handle their alcohol and they get, really irritable, downright angry when they drink? Now you're going to put that on teenagers in the woods? I mean, this has so much potential for disastrous outcomes. And weird to me is that it sounds like even girls were partaking in this. And why is that strange to me? I just picture when I was a kid, going to parties, you'd spend so much time on your hair and your cute little outfit, even if it was just like, even if it was just like jeans and a t-shirt, it had to be like just the right one. I find it so weird to picture girls getting ready for a party and then going to this like, dirty little campground and like boxing and rolling around on the ground. That's weird to me. But statistics are showing that girls are leveling the playing field when it comes to violent behavior. Girls typically, unlike boys who could have a fight and hopefully and usually move on and either just like let it go or even become friends, girls were less prone to fighting physically, but they can mentally, they can go all day long. You have a problem with somebody, now your friends have a problem with her, and we're going to make her life miserable for 2 months. That is kind of typical girl behavior, mean girl behavior. But it looks like these girls were working out their issues there too, boxing right alongside the boys. And I'm hearing that these kids were even going home with, blood and bruising and everything else. Heck, I would be really alarmed if my kid was coming home from parties bruised and battered. Let's talk about the knowledge that the adults may have had about the activities going on. So there are allegations only, that a lot of adults knew exactly what was going on at these parties, right down to the fight clubs, the alcohol, and whatnot. And that's a tough one because for the older teenagers, let's face it, there are a lot of rebellious teenagers, and sometimes there's just not a whole lot that you can do except try to keep them alive and keep the lines of communication open. So bravo for the people that knew that their kids were there. That way, if anything did go wrong, they at least knew where their children had been so that they could tell somebody. On the other hand, it would be so upsetting to me as a parent to know what was going on there. But how much can you really do? I mean, realistically, how much can you do besides, try to force your child not to go to these things? And they may or may not rebel, and then they're certainly not going to tell you anything else. But when it comes to these younger teenagers that allegedly were attending 13, 14, and on the younger side of 15, I'm sorry, if that was my kid, I'm dragging them out of there by their face. Like, no, absolutely not. You have no business. None of y'all have business being here, but you certainly have no business being here. So I don't want to go too harsh on the parents, for their knowledge, but I would like to know who was supplying the alcohol. Was it just the older attendees that for some reason think it's appropriate in their early 20s to party with young teenagers, or were parents supplying any of these substances? A lot of parents have the idea, and this has always been a thing, there was always that one parent that you knew as a teenager would let you drink in their house because they felt safer that they do it at home as long as no one's driving. Okay, I get that, and that is something that you see at a lot of graduation parties. I get that. However, it is a very bad idea, and I'll tell you why. So I used to live in Sarasota, Florida. And so about 15 years ago, there was a boy named Greg Kennedy, and his parents had that same mindset, and they did allow drinking at their home for his high school graduation. But lo and behold, there was a fight, and the fight soon snowballed into a whole bunch of kids on his side, a whole bunch of kids on the other side, and rolled out into the middle of the street. Somebody ended up curb stomping him, as the term is, and he died after hitting his head on the curb. So the parents were charged because they allowed the alcohol to be at their home with these minors drinking it. So you have to be really cautious if you start having that kind of way of thinking, because anything can happen and you are putting yourself in a very, bad situation legally and maybe even morally, but that's not for me to decide. So tell me your thoughts on the actual party. Do you believe that this was a regular thing? I do. I think that there's enough pictures because we seem to have a lot of pictures of other parties there. Just can't seem to get a whole lot of pictures of the party. And, not for nothing, but like when you look at the invitation for this party and the two boys boxing, you see everybody there with their phones. And we've been saying that all along. There is no possible way that there are not hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of videos and pictures of the going away, end of year party. But nonetheless, do you think that it was just a little too much, that these kids had too much freedom to just, constantly party however they wanted, to what extent that they wanted, because they seem to go pretty hard. We're talking, there was even a Venmo set up by one young man where he was taking like orders for substances and alcohol. I mean, no wonder they're all going to college. I mean, they're very business-minded children. They're running bars, they're taking orders, they're doing whatever they're doing. And, this is not just, like I said, this is not a couple of beers and a couple of kids in the woods. These are highly organized get-togethers. And I'm just really concerned that something may have happened that night that has led to Kiely's ultimate outcome. And we can dismiss it as an accident, fueled by too much alcohol, potentially other substances, and then an attempt to drive home. Or we can say, you know what, we are not satisfied with that, and that might end up being the conclusion, but we're not satisfied to just write it off as that just yet, because this party looks like there was a lot of potential for a lot of other disastrous outcomes. And if Kiely was the result of a disastrous outcome, we want to get to the bottom of it. And then who is held accountable? Do we hold the teenagers accountable? I mean, do we? Or do we look for the people that may have been older and contributing to this? Because I don't care. They didn't buy that alcohol themselves. Unless it is I don't even know if I should say this. It is a very small town. I don't know if any local little convenience stores or anything would have allowed them to purchase it. They're not supposed to, but we all know that sometimes underage people do have fake IDs, or they just have that one store they know that nobody's really going to ask questions. I don't know. But if it's a really small town, I would think that even if you had a fake ID, the person there probably is pretty familiar with most of them, not the out-of-towners, but, at least the locals. And I can't imagine that they would give it to them. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts on all of this. Do you think that these Fight Club, get sloshed, get faded, whatever the terms are these days, parties were just absolutely too much? This whole community should have known that these were a regular thing and that these kids were going way too hard and tried to put a stop to it? Or do you feel like, hey, teenagers are teenagers, they do what they do, and at least maybe some of the parents at least knew where their kids were and had some kind of open communication with them? And do you believe that these fight clubs are just kind of maybe not such a bad way to let kids get stuff off their chest and, blow off some steam? Or do you think like this is gross and weird and like, what the hell? Because I don't know. Especially the girls doing it. And then now all these allegations that Kate might have had one of these fights and that it might have been with Kiely. That is completely just a rumor, and I don't even know where it originated from or if there's any basis to it. But there was, which I'm going to show you. If you look on the very bottom, Jagger at one point is being asked if there was a fight, and he doesn't really say yes or no, but he's answering, it looks like, allegedly, may be him answering, it may not be, him saying that the rumor is that it was with Kate. So was that a real fight? Was that one of these fight club fights? Was there even a fight? Tell me your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts on all of this. This makes me want to just like, I don't know, lock my kids in the house, but you can't do that either. So I'll talk to you soon. Talk to me in the comments. I love hear from all of you, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay? Bye.